Good morning, everyone. This is Vincent Martinez. I'm the Director of Research and Operations for Architecture 2030 and acting as Interim Director of the 2030 Districts Network. Thank you for joining this call about 2030 Districts Network, about what a 2030 district is as a high-performance building district. I'm going to present for about 40 minutes and record this presentation. And then we'll open up for the last 20 minutes of the call for questions and answers. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat window and I can try to address them directly. So to get started, 2030 Districts started about 3 years ago in Seattle, Washington, and have now disseminated into 5 established 2030 districts and 8 emerging districts, which we'll get to towards the end of the presentation, specifics on those cities. I would want to start with the global need. For the first time ever, the majority of the Earth's population now lives in cities. We're rapidly urbanizing across the globe. We live and work and play in cities and the buildings that are in those cities. Globally, over the next 16 years, it's expected that we will move about 1.6 billion people into cities. Rapid urbanization. Much of that will happen in China. Over 250 million people, the entire population of the United States, will be moving into urban centers in China. And in order to accommodate those people, about 900 billion square feet will be new and renovated globally over the next 16 years. So what does 900 billion square feet look like? What are we expecting in terms of growth, in terms of renovation and new construction globally? Well, the United States is about 300 billion square feet on its own. So we're talking about, over the next 16 years, building a new construction and renovation of about 3.5 times the current building stock of the United States. So this is a pivotal opportunity as well as an urgent need for us to get this right in terms of the new construction and major renovation globally. So we really need a transformation of the building sector to address the climatic issues, the economic issues with this much urbanization. And in order to do that, we think we need to have sustainable carbon neutral urbanization. So that's where 2030 districts kick in. 2030 districts are unique private-public partnerships with the private in front of the public here for good reason, which we'll get into, that brings together property owners, managers, and developers, those that manage and develop and own properties, with local governments and business leaders and professional service providers and community stakeholders. And the intention of a 2030 district is really around creating a business model for urban sustainability. And we're going to do that through collaboration, through leveraged financing and resources, and we're already seeing great success in the 5 established 2030 districts that are up and running. So why a district? Why would we even care about looking at this and as opposed to looking at it as a building by building level like we have been for the past 25 years? Well, districts present great opportunities for shared metrics and targets. We can actually have a shared language and communication between buildings. We allow for opportunities of scale and efficiencies of scale. Many cities, especially on the east coast of the United States, have district energy systems which can improve the efficiencies of systems beyond what could happen in an individual building. We can have opportunities for hydronic heating systems in which buildings are using too much or have too much heat that they need to expel, and other buildings that need that heat. We should be sharing those resources rather than just throwing them out the window. And also, districts create a sense of place. They create a location. Usually what we focus on is the downtown cores, to show efficient resource management, economic leaders, market leaders, and economic investment opportunities. We are seeing global commerce look at cities now, and not just individual buildings. And we understand that in order to get a big company like Amazon or Zappos into your city, the city needs to have some sort of appeal to them, not just an individual building. And the builders and managers that are participating in 2030 districts are noticing this. And I use the example that Zappos moved into the downtown Old Town area in Las Vegas, and are putting millions and billions of dollars of economic opportunity into that city. And obviously they chose Las Vegas for a number of reasons, but if we think about sustainability, about low costs of energy, low costs of resources, within a region, that can be a big economic driver for bringing in businesses into that downtown core. Currently, almost every business either currently has or will soon have some sort of language around sustainability or resource efficiency or continuous process improvement. If they're not doing it now, they very will be soon. It's something that's going to be the core driving of the market. When you're talking with building owners today and you ask them, do they have a sustainability plan for their buildings, more than likely, if they're a Class A office building now, if they don't have that plan in place in 5 or 10 years, they won't be considered at that level. So this is really important for them to have, and many of them are taking note of that and already introducing their own types of plans. But most of these plans, and whether they're targets or economic plans, they don't have shared language. They have different targets and dates and different metrics, and that's okay. But it's very hard to communicate when you don't have a shared language. One building owner might have a goal of reducing their greenhouse gas emissions by 80% from their 1990 levels by 2030, and another might have a goal of reducing their cost of energy from 1999 levels by 15% by 2020. So there's all of these different metrics and targets in which folks can look at, but there's not a shared language around sustainability or around resource efficiency to help communicate those best practices, not only across the street from each other, from one business to another, but across portfolios and across cities and across the country and the globe, which we really need to do if we're going to have that effective transformation of urbanization. I mentioned that 2030 districts are labeled as private-public partnerships, with the private sector being first. We consider ourselves to be private sector-led and public sector supported. It's also a voluntary initiative. This is not some sort of regulation or mandate. This is a voluntary effort in which building owners and managers actively participate because they think that it makes good business sense and economic sense to do so. And they're uniting around a shared mission and goal set. But we also, again, want to really focus on connecting the reality, making sure that any improvements that building owners make on their properties makes economic sense. The main reason that we chose to lead with the private sector on this initiative is because we've seen many public sector initiatives lagger and sometimes fail due to changing in administration and policy. While you might have very progressive municipalities and administrations that will write sustainability plans, many of those sustainability plans have goals that are out for the future and long-term of 5 to 10 years, and many times that administration might turn over in 2 to 4 years. And so that sustainability plan, however ambitious it may be, when a new administration comes in, can get rewritten, it can get put on the shelf to gather dust, or it can be completely scrapped. And we've seen this happen even with building codes and regulations, where a new administration will come in and repeal the new building code. And I say this not to promote regulation, but to understand the market realities of changing administrations and policies. That how is the private sector and the development community supposed to know what they should be working towards in terms of building codes or efficiency plans or specs if the policy keeps shifting underneath their feet. So what we've done here is allow for the private sector to set that initiative for the next 16 years about where they want to see their targets go, and have the public sector support that with their programs and their incentives and their policies. That shared mission and goal and metrics is something that's really, really key in order to get global change and local change as well. If you don't set a goal, it's hard to get there. You can't manage what you don't measure, and I would say you can't measure what you can't measure, so you actually have to look at the data. So one of the things that we really try to promote here with 2030, and obviously within our name, is a time frame. And 2030 is short enough that 16 years away, we feel that's tangible. We can actually achieve those goals. We'll be around for that period of time. We may own that asset for that period of time. But it's also far enough away that we can be ambitious. We know that globally we need to get to these carbon neutral buildings and high performance buildings by that year, according to climate science. But we also know that it makes great economic opportunities in order to get to these reduction goals. Like we mentioned, if you're at a Class A office building now and you're not looking at these resource efficiency pieces, you may not be a Class A office building in 5 or 10 years, given where the market is heading. So that shared mission and goal is really important. So how do we define that? And we're all about performance in 2030 districts. We do label ourselves as high-performance building districts. And the performance is based off a set of targets, and what we look at for new construction and major renovation is based on the 2030 Challenge for Planning targets, which asks for a immediate 50% reduction compared to its baseline building of 50% in water and transportation emissions, and then we look at a 60% reduction in terms of energy use, ratcheting down by the year 2030 to have all new construction and major renovation in the district be carbon neutral or net zero energy. Now, for existing buildings, we take an aggregated approach. We understand that individual buildings will be able to achieve reductions of 20 or 30%, and all the way up to carbon neutral, depending on how aggressive that they can be and the constraints of that property. But we wanted to allow everybody to play in this larger system of the city and the 2030 district, and so we've created a set of performance goals in the 2030 Challenge for Planning for existing buildings that aggregates that performance reduction. So we want to see a 10% reduction across the district in energy, water, and transportation emissions by 2015, and a 50% reduction by the year 2030. So this is adding up all of the buildings' energy consumption, all the buildings' water consumptions in the district, and looking at an aggregated performance goal. And this is really because it's a zero barrier to entry for any property that wants to join the district. If they're a poor performer, they're not going to get penalized or called out because they're a poor performer. Instead, they can join to a collective initiative and learn from their neighbors that are already performing at high levels, and they can want to showcase that information, and they can learn from that and improve their own asset. Because what we're seeing is that even the high-performing buildings with the big property owners that have sustainability managers want to see their neighbors across the street improve their resource efficiency because of the economic development opportunities that are available for a city. Again, we're not competing on a building-by-building level anymore about these types of issues. If we want to bring in economic development into a city, the entire city needs to meet that criteria. So we talk with building owners, and we want to make sure that they understand the process in which we would evaluate their building, help set targets, deliver on savings, so that it makes it easier for them to run their asset. This is to help them improve their buildings. So first, what we will do in a 2030 district is compare buildings to similar buildings. We'll talk about how that's done. We set a target for our performance goals over a period of time. Again, we have aggregated performance goals, but we also want to look at that at an individual building level to help that building owner set a time frame that's appropriate for them. And then we want to help them deliver on those energy efficiency or resource efficiency projects by tapping in to the community stakeholders and professional stakeholders in the district. And overall, it helps save them time, money, and resources. So how do we set targets? Well, we are based on performance. We care a lot about metrics. We want to make sure that we are accurate in our comparisons. So we look at an apples-to-apples methodology. We do that using Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is a system that the EPA has set up, utilizing existing building data from a 2003 Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey to look at characteristics for that building. So we would compare an office building that's 100,000 square feet to another office building that's 100,000 square feet in that system. But even more is we're comparing a building with similar operating characteristics and schedule. So one that might be operated for 60 hours a week, we're comparing to another 60-hour-a-week building in that data set. So it's a very much an apples-to-apples comparison to your building with all of its parameters associated with energy use. The energy consumption baselines from Portfolio Manager are given to us in a statement of energy performance. We can see the site energy use intensity in kBTUs per square foot per year of that building. We can see the average site national site EUI and compare those two to see a percent reduction. And this is how we measure each building, and then we aggregate them all together to determine the performance of the district. In water, we've set baselines based off local district averages over a period of time. Unfortunately, there is not a national survey defining how water is used in buildings on a square footage level. So what we've had to do in each of the individual 2030 districts, and this example was from the Seattle 2030 district, is work with the local utilities and municipalities to collect water performance data on different building types. And many of those are proprietary, so what we do is we do that in aggregate, and we'll ask for 400 office buildings water consumption for the year in total, and we know the size of all of those buildings, so we can divide by the square footage to get what we call a WUI, a water use intensity for that building type. So you can see in this chart that it makes sense that fast food restaurants are using more water per square foot than other building types. And you can see as it ratchets down where office and medical office and hospitals fall in line of that water use in their buildings. And we want to help them identify the spaces in that building, set targets for them to achieve hopefully a 50% reduction by the year 2030. Transportation is a whole new issue really for a lot of building owners, but there's really a lot of great opportunities here, and we focus specifically on something that they can affect, which is commuter transit, something how the tenants get from their building. And we do that by looking at mode split surveys. Many of these are required already by states for employers over a certain number of employees, as well as certain city policies that require transportation management plans or commute reduction surveys. So this monitors how people are getting to and from the office, whether or not they're driving alone or taking public transit or biking or walking or even teleworking. And then we assign a distance per passenger mile. We assign a carbon metric so that we can understand on the average commuter how much carbon do they use in the course of the year. And then based off each of the subsequent surveys that the building owner will work with their tenants on, we can determine whether or not we're making progress in shifting people from high carbon intensity modes to lower carbon intensity modes. And they can do that through a number of different initiatives like mass transit passes or increasing the number of bike racks and showers and facility characteristics of their building. But really it can be also an economic benefit for the building owner. One of the interesting things that we've learned in the Seattle 2030 district through a group that we partner with called Commute Seattle, which is a group of the Metropolitan Improvement District, and they focus on the downtown core and reducing drive-alone trips, is that you actually improve and increase your revenue in your parking garages by offering flex passes to your tenants. Typically, you can rent out those those parking stalls for a higher revenue to the public as they park to the downtown than you could to your tenant. So by allowing that flexibility for the tenant to take other modes of transportation, you can increase that revenue and essentially max out your parking in a positive way. And we're seeing that many buildings across each of the 2030 districts are already meeting a lot of these performance goals. They're above and beyond the 50% reductions for many of the metrics, including water and transportation. So we know that it can be done, and we know that it can be done in all different types of buildings, whether they're from different vintages or different space types and use types. We're seeing it across the board in all of the 2030 districts, and it's really important to share these best practices. What's great about the 2030 district approach, again, is that all the building owners share their performance data, but none of them are called out publicly as to a high or a low performer. But 99% of the time, if you're doing great, you want to highlight that, and you want to talk about your best practices and your case studies to show that you're achieving those goals and you have a great asset. And so that can really help inform some of the poorer performing buildings to get up to that speed. So we focus on 3 different member and partner types within 2030 districts. The first and foremost of our audience and membership is building owners, managers, and developers, folks that operate and develop real estate within that 2030 district boundary, and in many cases even outside of that boundary. And we work with a number of organizations, both local property owners and managers, mom and pop owners, as well as the larger folks like Jones Lang LaSalle and CB Richard Ellis that manage multiple properties all across the globe. We also have focus on service stakeholders. These are professionals that provide services to buildings, and this can include architects, engineers, ESCOs, contractors, anybody that can help achieve those performance goals for that building owner. And then we also work with community stakeholders, and these are your NGOs, nonprofit organizations, and industry organizations, including folks like BOMA, the Building Owners and Management Association, and IFMA, the Facilities Management Association, AIA, USGBC, you name it, we want them involved in this effort. So what are we asking for from building owners and managers? I mentioned that it's an aggregated goal. We're not asking for any individual building to meet any performance target at any specific time. What we are asking for is information. We want building owners and managers, when they sign on to join a 2030 district and access the benefits that are available there, to share their water use, their energy use, their transportation information with the 2030 district voluntarily and privately. So that 2030 district entity is a third party. They're going to hold that information. They're not going to share it with anybody. They sign an agreement with you to do that. And they just want to look at that information so that they can present it in aggregate or anonymously in terms of portfolio reports, which we'll show in a few minutes. We also want to learn from their best practices. As I mentioned before, most of the time, if they're performing well, they will show those best practices and provide case studies. And we want to know what's not working. We want to know what your struggles and challenges are so that we can help break down barriers in the marketplace. So what do we think that the building owners and managers get as participating as part of this 2030 district after they make that commitment to share their data? Well, we're seeing all sorts of types of services and benefits for building owners and managers that join. Some that are around financial programs and utilizing benefits in terms of new financing strategies to make those improvements, improving their competitive positioning by joining the 2030 district and highlighting the great work that they're already doing by being part of a larger effort that's national in scope. We're seeing great access to exclusive incentives and discounts and programs. And we'll talk a lot about those in the next few minutes. Really exciting work there. And then we show them comparative analysis reports to see not only how are they comparing to that national median baseline, but also how are they competing against with their neighbors in their local market. We can get very, very specific, more specific than most have able to access because we have all the data from their competitors. And so it's kind of a cooperation model. By sharing your data, then you get to see everybody else's in an anonymous way. So nobody's information is identifiable, but we can learn a lot from how other people are performing and where you stand in the marketplace. So first off, and we saw a really great example of this with the Cleveland 2030 district, is they put together a welcome kit, a step-by-step onboarding email that explains to the building owner, welcome to the 2030 district, here are the types of services we hope to provide to you, here's how we want to see the data in Portfolio Manager. It should be a straightforward process. We're going to give you all the resources you need and be able to help you step-by-step along the way. So it's a great introductory package to get people started. And then they move forward into that assess, target, deliver, and I mentioned assess, target earlier, to really give them an idea of the energy management and guide to help them move forward with projects and really the intention of the 2030 district to help them improve their asset. In the financing realm, we have now what is a discontinued program, but was a very successful one that happened in the Seattle 2030 district with some Department of Energy funding, where the city was having a hard time reaching the larger commercial building audience in the city, and then enlisted the 2030 district to help them reach that audience as an aggregator of demand, essentially. And the CPW project, Community Power Works, had over 9 projects that went through it. It had over $500,000 in incentive money that could help property owners move forward on projects they normally wouldn't be able to. And we've seen tremendous examples of resource reduction. One of the hotels that took advantage of this program saw a 23% reduction in their energy use. So this is a really, really great opportunity that happened in Seattle, and we hope that many of these other programs will be filtered through 2030 districts in the future. We've also seen some of the firms that work on tax deductions for federal incentive programs come through 2030 districts to want to help them make sure that they take advantage of those programs. If you're doing 2030 district projects, more than likely you qualify for these types of incentive programs, and this is a tax deduction of $1.80 a square foot for commercial properties. And what's great about this partnership with this group, Capital Review Group, that wanted to help the 2030 district, is they're providing pro bono services to help you do that first assessment to make sure that you qualify, how much you would run through, do that scenario planning with you, and then you can move forward with them. So it's a really great service up front. We're also leveraging, through our larger purchasing power, great incentives and discounts. And we heard a great term recently that I think we'll start to adopt within 2030 districts called SPA, a Specialty Purchasing Alliance, and I think that that's a really great opportunity for us to call and package these types of services. But we're working with large companies, global companies like Microsoft and Accenture, and through a small smart buildings program. We're working with companies that are moving into the United States from other markets where they've been very successful, like Switch Automation coming from Australia. Or we're partnering with Nissan of North America on electric vehicles charging stations, and a company out of Boston called WeGoWise, which is an energy performance analysis platform. So really great things. WeGoWise is offering the first 10% of the square footage of every 2030 district the opportunity to try out their software for free. They're giving it for a year period, and what's great about WeGoWise is they have a great automated collection system for utility information. So those of you that have trouble with your utilities about collecting that information and working to type in your performance and utility bills every month, WeGoWise will actually go in for free and go into your online utility bills and screen scrape your PDF versions and put it into their platform and push it to Portfolio Manager. So it creates an automated way to gather that information over time, and then you can compare with some of their analysis tools on their website as well. So that's a great partnership that we're starting to see happen. We have a partnership with New Buildings Institute to utilize their First View analysis system, which takes just those 12 data points of monthly energy utility bills from different sources, and they're able to then chart that in a way to look at your heating and cooling and electric baseload and gas baseload demands on that building just through data points of utility bills. And what's great is they can identify whether or not you're heating and cooling simultaneously based on these curves that they've written in these algorithms. They can tell you if you need to improve your lighting systems, if you need to improve your heating system. So it's essentially taking a very quick high-level audit just by looking at your utility bill information. It's a great partnership that we're seeing applied over 65 buildings in Seattle right now. Seattle also has a partnership with Microsoft and Accenture on the Smart Buildings program. This is a program that Microsoft originally developed on their campus in Redmond and saw great savings. And essentially it's continuous commissioning where they're taking disaggregated building automation systems and components and aggregating them together into the cloud platform and pushing them off into a command center that can have alerts and cost information about knowing when that damper is not going to open before it doesn't open, rather than waiting to hear from a user saying that they're too cold or they're too hot and then trying to assess the problem. It's a continuous automation program. And we're seeing that now adopted into 4 major projects in downtown Seattle. 3 of them are now collecting data, and 2 of them have already seen significant results over a 7-month period. One has seen at least a 5% reduction, and the other is a 10.7% reduction. And these are already high-performance buildings, so this is kind of like squeezing the last drops out of that lemon when you've already squeezed a lot of that energy out. We also mentioned the partnership with the Australian company moving in North America called Switch Automation. They're also working with Microsoft and the Seattle 2030 district, and they've actually put high interval data, taking advantage of 15-minute interval data from the local electric utility, and plotted that in an online platform for 20 buildings in downtown Seattle. They also have really great dashboard capability where you can set up individual types of dashboards for individual projects and users. And so it's a very robust, dynamic platform that we're excited about that partnership that's happening in Seattle. I mentioned Nissan of North America. We have a transportation goal in order to get people out of carbon-intensive modes of transportation, so we were very excited about this partnership. It's starting in Seattle, but we're in the process of taking this partnership nationally with the district's network. And what Nissan is offering is that 10 garages in downtown Seattle, they're going to pay for the charging stations. So there, in many cases, it can be up to 4 chargers per garage. So we're talking anywhere between 10 and 40 electric vehicle charging stations that are there being provided for free from Nissan to owners and managers. So free infrastructure. And the reason for that, why is something free? Well, Nissan wants to see the improved pickup of electric vehicles, specifically their Nissan Leaf, and Seattle's a great market to do that with. And so they need the infrastructure in order to support the electric vehicle. So that's why they're interested in Seattle, but they're also interested in other markets, and we're working with them to bring that across the network. Seattle's also taken on an additional performance goal of stormwater management. Seattle has looked at water conservation. Well, that is part of the 2030 district goals. The utility feels like stormwater management is a much more important issue for them to take on currently due to the runoff into the Puget Sound. So the 2030 district stepped up to help the city with that initiative, and they've worked with a group called Herrera and Associates to put together a stormwater calculator, which is a great visual Excel tool that explains how to use rainwater catchment, basin, cistern to help alleviate stormwater runoff and combined sewer overflow into the Puget Sound. So that's a great partnership. That's a free tool available. And then we're also working with the city to help on new construction side, for those projects that are looking to target the 2030 district goals for new construction, they will get a central point of contact and a concierge at the city to facilitate communication across multiple departments at the city in its permitting process, and is guaranteed to reduce permitting time by 3 months. And for a developer in this region specifically, that's a huge economic benefit to get in front of the line when we're seeing more construction here. I think King County is the second largest, fastest growing county in the country, and Seattle has actually more growth than its suburbs for one of the first times in a long time. So this is really, really important to the developer market to get in the door, and if they target those performance goals, they're getting a better asset that they can sell, but they're also helping to reduce the time of their permitting. And then finally, the Seattle 2030 District is also providing early energy modeling assistance for new construction projects when developers may not have the time or the money to look at orientation of the building and massing systems. It's really important and affects energy efficiency dramatically, so the 2030 District is providing this as a service for new development. So across the board, what 2030 districts are trying to do, not only leveraging these partnerships in this special purchasing alliance or SPA, but trying to get together a collective amount of information to do a building assessment. Right now, there is no general practitioner for the building owner. If they want to assess the state of their building and do an audit, they'll usually go to an energy service company or an engineering firm, and they'll do a full-on audit. Most of these folks that do these types of work are specialists. Not all of them. Obviously, we're working with great contractors and energy service companies, but for the most part, these are the companies that have a set business model where they work chillers or they work on boilers and they focus on the mechanical system, something that's easy for them to count. And I use that as an equivalent of instead of going to your general practitioner asking for an update on how you're doing, you're going directly to the heart surgeon. And so rather than going directly to the heart surgeon and asking how you're doing and them telling you need a new heart, let's have a holistic view, just like we would in medicine, of the building. So let's take your blood pressure, let's take your heart rate, and let's do that for the building. The way we do that is through checking out your performance and your utility bills, and we can compare and contrast that to national statistics and media as well as to your neighbors to see how you're performing. And from there, like a general practitioner, we're not going to give you all the answers, but we're going to point you to that heart surgeon if you need a new heart. But if you just need to go visit a nutritionist or exercise a little bit more and see a personal trainer, we have those connections as well within the 2030 districts to put you in touch with building operator certification programs or facility management certifications from our industry partners to help your operators get up to speed and make that building perform a lot better. So what we do is provide you with a portfolio summary. This is an example of one that we've done for one of the 2030 district members, where we evaluate 3 of their office buildings. We compare them to the baseline, to the city's average, to the district average, and we look at how they're performing compared to those as a whole. Again, it's an aggregated performance. And we also look at the cost of energy that they're spending versus the average in the city. And then what we're starting to put together is these periods of time in which we can look for the last 3 years to see how you're comparing against the median of that data set for those office buildings and portfolios, as well as our target, and then the different quartiles. So this is an example of one of those properties in orange. They're performing right around the median for the past 3 or 4 years, and then right in the middle of 2013 something happened, and we think that this happens to do with some error in their data set that kicked them way, way off the chart. So this is something that they need to look back and see if something happened in their building or it just happened to be an error in the data on the portfolio side. And we can do the same thing for water use intensity. We look at the same thing, and this is a property, while they happen to be performing for their office portfolio at the median in terms of energy, they're in the highest quartile in terms of water reductions. So they're doing a tremendous job here, and we would want to highlight that particular topic. Then we look at the individual buildings as well to compare against that national median, against local averages, to see how that individual building is doing at that period of time and when they last had their data updated. And then we can look at that building over a period of time to see how they've improved. So this is a perfect example of showing a very successful project from a 2030 district member that went through a 2030 district strategic energy management service program to look at their portfolio of buildings that started right around 2012. And you can see in the orange line that they were performing right around the median, or in between the median and the 25th percentile until about 2012 when we went through this program, and then you can see a direct drop in their performance. They're actually moved from the median into the highest quartile by within a year and a half mode. They've seen 15% reduction across their portfolio. So it's a great case study to show that this is actually happening. We also look at the same information in terms of water use intensity, and as we get more and more data, we can add to this data set to see how other buildings in the district and in the city use water. This, like I mentioned, this individual portfolio of office buildings, and this office building in particular, is one of the highest performers in terms of water efficiency. So it's great to see that over a period of time, that they remain at the top. But then we also have anomalies. I mentioned we saw that spike in 6 months ago in this portfolio, and this is due to this building. Something happened in this building. It's performing way off the charts in terms of its energy performance. And that could be due to a data error, or it could be something directly happening in the building that we're catching. And so while we see it on a snapshot scale, we also see it over time that they were performing just fine, in the 25th percentile, and until recently, and something kicked in. So this is an indication when we have conversations with the building on what's happening in your building. And what's great about this type of analysis, many folks ask us about, well, we might have doubled our occupancy because of the recession. We were barely occupied, and now we're booming. So shouldn't that indicate that this is the change? Well, these are normalized for occupancy and schedule because we're comparing to a similar building with similar occupancy and schedule at each point of time. So this is actually not due to vacancy or schedules. Something's happening here that we can identify directly. Again, we do the same thing with water. While that building might have had an error in terms of energy, it's still doing very well in terms of water, and we can see that it's been operating at some of the highest in that district's office portfolios. I'll also mention that these are direct comparisons for that particular office building. You'll see in the top that we are looking, this is a Seattle member, we're looking at office buildings between 200 and 300 square feet. So this is a direct comparison for their market. This is not just a comparison to all office buildings, and many of those may not be appropriate. We can get very, very specific in how we're comparing these buildings in 2030 districts. We also look at their energy use over a period of the year. This would be an example of a healthy, what I would call a healthy office building in Seattle's climate. We use more energy in the winter, less energy in the summer. We're a heating load-dominated climate. This is what we'd expect to see in a good building, and this is when we can see a building is simultaneously heating and cooling. It's relatively flat. They're probably doing heating in the summer and cooling in the winter in order to balance those loads out, which is not necessarily appropriate for that building. And many building owners and managers, they think on high level they might not get this information right off the bat from a graphic like this. Definitely their facilities managers would notice this. But in order to communicate this even at high levels, we want to show this is a happy building and this is a not so happy building. So moving on past the building owners and managers, we have other partners and commitments that we ask for from professional service stakeholders. And these are, again, our architects, engineers, ESCOs, contractors. What we want them is we want to use their professional expertise and experience. They want to share that information with the 2030 District building owner and manager members and support them in their programs. Some are offering pro bono services to get their foot in the door. They'll help you with a free audit, and that way they can help you move forward on one of your projects and develop that relationship. It's not required, but it's definitely seen to work across 2030 districts. But we also want their help with programs and services the staff and the board take on. This is a collective effort across the community, and we need those service providers that bring valuable expertise to the table. And what they get out of it is they get to interact with market-leading clients and building owners and managers. They get to connect to new ideas for their customers to help enhance their services. They get recognized as joining the 2030 district as a leader. So it's really a great opportunity for some of these professional stakeholders to get involved. We also work with community stakeholders, which I mentioned are the nonprofit organizations, NGOs, industry organizations, and many of these folks are already doing great work in this area. We're not trying to compete or take advantage of those services and try to duplicate them, but rather we want to leverage those services and expand their audience. So if BOMA is doing a great program, or if IFMA is doing a great program or a building operator certification, we want to highlight those to other folks that might not be aware of those types of services, and leverage and enhance your reach. But we want them to also participate and bring those services into the 2030 district as a whole collaborative. So again, we want to expand their organization's reach and their outreach efforts and connect them with thought leadership and like-minded organizations. So again, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. All we really want to do is frame a larger effort around these downtown districts and bring all the folks that are bringing something to the table together. So we use the analogy of being a frame to encompass a larger mission, and again, we're about those shared metrics and goals to unite everybody on a common shared language. So I'll end with just a highlight of where we are with the existing 2030 districts. Seattle started with the initial 2030 district about 3.5 years ago. They've since seen a tremendous growth in the downtown outreach efforts. They have about 40 million square feet of committed properties, with 36 million of those sharing performance data. So it's really a tremendous effort that's happening there. It focuses on the downtown core, as well as the South Lake Union area, which is where Amazon's headquarters are, and a lot of new construction projects are happening. To the east, they focus on Seattle University, which is a member, as well as a Virginia Mason healthcare facility, and they also have the new Bullitt Center, which is touted as the greenest office building in the country, 6 stories, net zero energy, net zero water. Really great project that's part of the 2030 district in Seattle. In Cleveland, they have made tremendous success in the 2 years that they've been in operation. They've got about 13 million square feet of committed properties in their downtown area. They're also looking to expand to a satellite district in the University Circle area. So they'll have major partners joining that effort very soon that are in the institutional field. They recently had the Cleveland Indians sign on, so that's a really partnership that they hope to help that facility achieve high performance goals as well. We have the Pittsburgh 2030 district, which is run through the Green Building Alliance, which is a U.S. Green Building Council chapter in Pittsburgh. They focus all along the western Pennsylvania region, but their downtown district has over 40 million square feet committed, as well as, just like Seattle has. They have all the major stadiums. The Pittsburgh Pirates, the Penguins, and the Steelers are all participating in this effort. PNC Bank is a great institutional partner that they have there, and they're doing a tremendous effort. They recently released their latest energy performance report, which you can look at on their website. They also are looking to expand into a neighboring very commercial area called Oakland, which is just outside of their downtown core, that will be bringing on numerous square feet very soon. We have the Los Angeles 2030 district startup. They're seeing tremendous momentum now with, in addition to the city of Los Angeles, the GSA, and Ocean West Partners. They're bringing on Jones Lang LaSalle as a great partner who's participating in a number of established 2030 districts, as well as emerging district efforts into their downtown area. They recently expanded their border to include the new development called Little Tokyo on the southern side of this map. And then our recent 2030 district, which was established in December, is the Denver 2030 district, which looks at their downtown core. You can see the 16th Street Mall, which is a great pedestrian area that's joined in that effort, and a number of property owners and managers. They have over 17 million square feet that have joined in that currently, and they've only been around and operating for about 6 months. So it's a tremendous effort happening in Denver. This is just a thrown-up slide of a number of partners that are participating in the existing 30 districts. This is not all-inclusive. There's numerous partners, but you can see the scale of local partners and development companies and property management companies, national players. We have everybody from NGOs to industry organizations participating in these efforts. It's such a great thing to see. We have over 100 property owners and managers represented in the 5 cities, and we have over 200 different community organizations and professional stakeholders. So it's really a joint effort of everyone. Together, that we make up the 2030 Districts Network. We have over 117 million square feet committed within the 5 districts. I mentioned that we're having a number of emerging districts that are approaching across the country, including Stamford, Connecticut, Toronto. In Canada, we have Ann Arbor and Detroit, Michigan, San Antonio and Dallas, Texas, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and San Francisco, California, that are all in the emerging phase. We have others that are also in the prospective phase as well. But together, we expect many of these districts will launch in the year 2014, could double the square footage of commitments, meaning we would move into probably close to 250 million square feet of committed real estate within the 13 districts. And to give you a size, a scale of what that means, the entire commercial building stock of the city of Boston is about 275 billion square feet. Not the city, but all buildings, all commercial buildings in the city of Boston. So you were really talking about a game-changing amount that we can leverage to get additional purchasing alliances, shared leveraged financing, shared resources. And the great thing, again, is we're all in the same metrics, we're all in the same vision, we're all speaking the same language, and we can communicate with each other. That's the power of a network. And for those small commercial building owners that are participating in these, they're taking advantage of opportunities they would never get to take advantage of without being part of a larger national effort like this. And we are already seeing that. We have a partnership through a grant from the Department of Energy with Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, providing resources for small commercial building owners in 2030 districts. And that's going extremely well so far. We're about 9 months into the grant process, and this will be a 2.5-year term for this project that we hope will continue beyond that. So they're already seeing advantages of this, and we're seeing 2030 districts act as an aggregator of demand as well as a focal point for dissemination of new products and services. So with that, I'll share one last slide, and this is a sort of a case study of where we are in the Seattle 2030 district to show you how well these buildings are doing. The shared 36 million square feet that are happening in Seattle, compared to that national median baseline, they're already performing just over 20% better than those baselines, those properties that are sharing and participating in the 2030 district. That's a great example of high-performance buildings happening already. I mean, we're not taking advantage for all of that, or credit for all of that work. They've been doing that work here in Seattle for a long time. But what's great is that we're highlighting it for probably one of the first times as a district. And that can help us, again, with that economic opportunity. And together, if we look at all the other buildings in the district which we have yet to engage, and we assume that they're operating right at baseline, just those 36 million square feet bring the entire 90 million square feet down to about a 9% reduction. So we're well on our way to that 10% reduction by the year 2015. We need to improve to slightly better, bring in more of our partners, but we are well on track to making this an achievable goal. And I'll be wrapping up this presentation with talking about, if you're interested in 2030 districts, if you're interested in starting one, how does that happen in a local area? Well, we want you to engage and create a local exploratory committee, gather folks from building owners and managers and developers, as well as your professional stakeholders and community organizations to come together around this idea. We focus on the urban core. We think there's more bang for our buck there. It's usually more resource intensive, more square footage, as well as brings in fewer owners and managers that control those. It's easier to catch the big fish in that small pond. And then we'll focus on a boundary to create a sense of place and a performance calculation for that area. So we're involved. We have a network in which we're bringing on and onboarding new district projects. So if you're interested in this, contact us, and we want to help you form a 2030 district in your area. And that joint ownership is really key to make sure you engage everybody you can in the initial development process. We don't want this to be one organization led or one municipality led that goes down a path and then it feels like the ownership is lost and held by one entity. This should be a collaborative effort. So we've seen 2030 districts emerge as part of an existing entity like we saw in Pittsburgh with the Green Building Alliance. Usually these are aligned parties with shared missions. They support the network goals and the district goals. They're able to obtain funding. And they have accountability of the district. They usually have a 2030 district advisory board, which is now a new requirement for 2030 districts, to make sure that that's a board that has all of the players that should be involved in the 2030 district getting to speak their mind and have that sense of joint ownership. Otherwise, we saw Cleveland and Seattle form new organizations devoted to this. Obviously, we don't want to compete with other of our partners on this, but sometimes there needs to be a little bit more focus on the specific initiative in a city and an existing entity can't really shift their focus from where they are, but they can still participate and leverage a lot of their work into helping the 2030 district. But if you are interested in forming a new entity, we do have examples of bylaws and mission statements and can help you develop that local organization and communicate with our network and best practices on that. And then finally, our main requirements for starting a 2030 district are it being private sector led, specifically building owners, managers, and developers. 2030 districts do sign a charter with Architecture 2030 to join the 2030 districts network and use branding. Again, we want to make sure that the quality assurance is high, that we are using the same metrics and methods and mission. And then to target those 2030 challenge planning targets of energy, water, and transportation emissions, and then have at least 5 owners and managers, different owners and managers, join that effort. This is not, again, just a city-led initiative. This is not just one campus-led initiative or one developer-led initiative. This is a group of owners coming together around a shared vision and goal for their area. So with that, I'll leave you. We have a formation toolkit on our website. You can visit us at 2030districts.org and look at our formation toolkit, which provides a value introduction, an example of how 2030 districts differ from other district types of approaches around sustainability, and talking about how do you form your organizational structure, as well as an example of the charter that you would sign with Architecture 2030. So I welcome you to take a look at the website. We've got great videos on there, and there's also a portal into all of the established 2030 districts websites so you can see what's going on there. We will be updating our whole entire network website in the next three months, so take a look there. We'll send out announcements to the group that you probably got invited to this webinar through that email chain. So with that, I'm going to unmute folks and take questions for the next 10 to 15 minutes. We did start a little late, but I want to allow folks, if they want to stay on past the hour, they're welcome to. I know we are over our time, but let folks stay if they have questions. Have any questions? I don't know if you're all unmuted, but you should be. And you can also type them into the chat window and I can address them there. Okay, well, thank you all for joining us on this webinar about 2030 districts. You can reach us through our website at 2030districts.org, and we encourage you to get in contact and if you have any questions, and get involved in your local 2030 districts if they're in your region. Thank you.